The anchoring effect and how to use it. The anchoring effect is one of the most powerful and well-documented cognitive biases in psychology. It refers to our tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter when making decisions. This initial information serves as an anchor that influences all subsequent judgments, even when the anchor is completely arbitrary or irrelevant to the decision at hand. In one famous study, researchers asked participants to spin a wheel that was rigged to land on either 10 or 65. They then asked participants to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. Those who spun 10 guessed an average of 25%, while those who spun 65 guessed an average of 45%. The random number from the wheel had no logical connection to the question, yet it significantly influenced people's estimates. This demonstrates just how powerful and irrational the anchoring effect can be. Have you ever walked into a store and seen a jacket priced at $300, thought it was too expensive, but then noticed another jacket nearby for $150 and thought that seemed reasonable? That second jacket might have seemed overpriced on its own, but compared to the first one, it felt like a bargain. This is anchoring at work, and it has influenced countless decisions you have made. Think about when you negotiated your salary. If the employer named a number first, your entire negotiation revolved around that anchor. Or remember when you were buying a car and the salesperson started with the highest trim level before showing you the mid-range option, which suddenly seemed sensible by comparison. Every time you have seen a product marked down from an original price, that original price was an anchor making the sale price feel like a steal, even if the item was never actually sold at the higher price. You can use the anchoring effect ethically in many situations. When negotiating a salary, for example, research suggests that whoever names a number first has a significant advantage because that number becomes the anchor around which all subsequent negotiations revolve. If you are selling something, start with a higher price than you expect to get. If you are buying, start lower. The key is to anchor the conversation at a point that is advantageous to you while still being within the realm of reason. Reciprocity, the universal rule of human interaction. Reciprocity is perhaps the most fundamental principle governing human social behavior. It is the deeply ingrained tendency to want to return favors, pay back debts, and treat others as they have treated us. This principle is universal across all human cultures, and it forms the bedrock of human cooperation and social exchange. When someone does something nice for you, you feel a powerful psychological pressure to return the favor. This feeling is so strong that it can override other considerations, including whether you actually like the person, or whether the return favor is proportionate to what you received. The power of reciprocity has been demonstrated in countless studies. In one classic experiment, researchers sent holiday cards to complete strangers. A surprising number of recipients sent cards back even though they had no idea who the sender was. The simple act of receiving a card triggered the reciprocity instinct and compelled people to respond in kind. This demonstrates how automatic and powerful this response is. Think about a time when someone gave you an unexpected gift. Maybe a coworker brought you coffee, a neighbor helped you with your groceries, or a friend offered to drive you to the airport. Remember how you felt afterward, that nagging sense that you owed them something, that you needed to return the favor somehow. This feeling is reciprocity, and it has shaped your behavior more than you realize. Have you ever bought something from a salesperson who gave you a free sample, even though you did not really need the product? Have you ever agreed to help someone because they had helped you in the past, even when it was inconvenient? Have you ever felt obligated to invite someone to your party because they had invited you to theirs? These were not random acts of generosity on your part. You were responding to the deep psychological pull of reciprocity, the invisible thread that connects every favor given to a favor returned. To use reciprocity effectively, look for opportunities to give first. This could be as simple as offering genuine compliments, sharing useful information, or doing small favors without being asked. The key is that the giving should feel genuine and unconditional. If people sense that you are only giving in order to get something back, the effect is greatly diminished. The most powerful form of reciprocity comes from truly generous giving with no strings attached. When you give freely, people feel an even stronger obligation to reciprocate. Social proof and the power of the crowd. Human beings are deeply influenced by the behavior of others, especially in uncertain situations. When we are unsure how to act, we look to those around us for guidance. This tendency is known as social proof, and it is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. We assume that if many people are doing something, it must be the right thing to do. This assumption is often correct because the collective wisdom of the crowd can indeed provide valuable information about how to behave appropriately in various situations. Social proof explains many phenomena that might otherwise seem puzzling. It explains why laugh tracks increase ratings for comedy shows, even though viewers claim to find them annoying. It explains why bartenders seed their tip jars with a few bills at the start of their shift. It explains why testimonials and reviews are so effective in marketing. When we see evidence that others have made a particular choice, we become more likely to make the same choice ourselves. Remember when you were choosing a restaurant in an unfamiliar area and picked the one with more people inside, assuming it must be better? Or when you were scrolling through products online and automatically filtered by best-selling or most reviewed? Think about a time when you laughed at a joke that was not particularly funny, simply because everyone around you was laughing. You have probably chosen books, movies, and music based on what was popular rather than what genuinely interested you. Consider how many opinions you hold not because you researched them yourself, but because the people around you seem to believe them. That hairstyle you got because everyone was getting it. That restaurant you avoided because your friends said it was bad. That political opinion you adopted because it seemed like what smart people believed. All of these were shaped by social proof. You were following the crowd without even realizing it, assuming that if everyone else was doing something, it must be the right thing to do. The power of social proof is amplified when the people we observe are similar to us. We are more influenced by the behavior of people we perceive as peers than by the behavior of those we see as different from ourselves. This is why marketers often use testimonials from ordinary people rather than celebrities. While celebrity endorsements can be effective, they often lack the persuasive power of seeing someone just like us making a recommendation. You can leverage social proof in many ways. When making a request, mention that others have already agreed. When presenting an idea, point out that similar ideas have been successful elsewhere. When trying to change someone's behavior, show them evidence that their peers have already made the change. The key is to provide credible evidence that others are doing what you want the person to do. The scarcity principle: why less is more. Things become more desirable when they are scarce or when we perceive that we might lose the opportunity to have them. This scarcity principle is deeply rooted in human psychology, and it influences our decisions in countless ways. We want what we cannot have, and we value things more highly when they are in short supply. This tendency likely evolved because in ancestral environments, scarce resources were often the most valuable, and competition for them was fierce. The scarcity principle operates through two main mechanisms. First, scarcity signals value. We assume that if something is rare, it must be valuable. Otherwise, why would it be in such short supply? Second, scarcity triggers loss aversion. We are motivated more strongly by the fear of losing something than by the prospect of gaining something of equal value. When we perceive scarcity, we feel that we might lose the opportunity to have something, and this fear motivates action. Research has shown that the scarcity principle becomes even more powerful when scarcity is recent or when we perceive that we are in competition with others for the scarce resource. A limited time offer creates urgency because we fear losing the opportunity. Knowing that others want the same thing we want intensifies our desire because we do not want to miss out on something that others value. Think about that time you bought something you did not really need because the website said only 3 left in stock. Remember the urgency you felt when a sale was ending in just 2 hours, pushing you to make a purchase before you had time to think it through. Have you ever wanted something more intensely, simply because you were told you could not have it? Perhaps a relationship became more appealing when the other person seemed less available, or a job opportunity felt more exciting when you learned other candidates were competing for it. Consider how many purchases you have made because they were limited edition or exclusive, even though the regular version would have served you just as well. That concert ticket you overpaid for because they were almost sold out, that product you grabbed because it was the last one on the shelf, that membership you joined because enrollment was closing soon. These decisions were all driven by scarcity, the fear of missing out on something that might never be available again. To use the scarcity principle, ethically focus on genuinely limited opportunities or unique benefits. Highlight what makes something exclusive or special. Emphasize what people stand to lose by not acting rather than what they stand to gain. Be honest about limitations rather than creating artificial scarcity. People are quick to recognize manipulation and will lose trust in you if they discover that your scarcity claims are false. Authority and the power of expertise. We are strongly inclined to defer to authority figures and experts. This tendency makes sense from an evolutionary perspective because people with specialized knowledge or experience often do know better than we do. Deferring to their judgment allows us to benefit from their expertise without having to acquire it ourselves. However, this tendency can also lead us astray when we defer too readily to people who appear to be authorities but may not actually have the relevant expertise. The power of authority is demonstrated by the famous Milgram experiments in which ordinary people were willing to administer what they believed were dangerous electrical shocks to another person simply because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to do so. These experiments showed just how powerful the authority principle is and how it can override our own moral judgments in certain circumstances. Remember when you followed advice from someone simply because they wore a white coat, had a fancy title, or spoke with confidence? Think about a time when you believed a claim because it came from an expert on television, even though you had no way to verify their credentials. Have you ever changed your opinion because someone with more experience or education disagreed with you, even when your original instinct might have been correct? Consider how many health decisions you have made based on what a doctor told you, without questioning or seeking a second opinion. Think about financial choices you made because an advisor in a nice suit recommended them. Remember that time you followed instructions from someone in uniform or trusted information because it came from an official-sounding source. These moments were all shaped by the authority principle, your deep-seated tendency to defer to those who appear to have expertise, power, or credentials, even when healthy skepticism might have served you better. To leverage the authority principle, establish your own credibility and expertise in areas where you genuinely have knowledge. Share your qualifications, experience, and track record when relevant. If you lack direct expertise, cite sources who do have it. People are more likely to accept information that comes from a credible source than the same information from an unknown source. Even simple cues like professional attire or titles can increase perceived authority, though these should be backed up by actual expertise. When trying to influence others, consider who would be the most credible source for your message. Sometimes the most effective approach is not to deliver the message yourself, but to have it delivered by someone with greater relevant authority. A recommendation from a trusted expert carries more weight than the same recommendation from a stranger. Look for opportunities to build coalitions with credible advocates who can speak on behalf of your ideas. Liking why we say yes to people we like. We are far more likely to comply with requests from people we like than from people we dislike or feel neutral toward. This seems obvious, but the factors that determine liking are more complex and more easily influenced than most people realize. Understanding what makes people like us gives us powerful tools for building rapport and creating positive relationships. Physical attractiveness is one factor that influences liking, though its effects go far beyond romantic contexts. Research shows that attractive people are perceived as more intelligent, more trustworthy, and more persuasive than less attractive people, even when there is no logical reason to believe this is true. While we cannot easily change our physical features, we can enhance our attractiveness through grooming dress and positive body language. Think about that salesperson who complimented you, found things in common with you, and made you feel special before asking for the sale. Remember how much easier it was to say yes to them compared to someone who just launched into their pitch. Have you ever agreed to do something you did not want to do simply because the person asking was attractive, charming, or similar to you in some way? Consider the friends whose recommendations you always follow, even when objective evidence might suggest otherwise. Think about that colleague you always support in meetings, not because their ideas are always best, but because you genuinely like them. Remember the neighbor you helped move furniture because they were so friendly, while you might have made an excuse for someone less personable. Every time you have bought something at a party from a friend, donated to a cause because someone you admired asked, or given someone the benefit of the doubt because they seemed likable, you were experiencing the power of liking shaping your decisions. Similarity is another powerful driver of liking. We like people who are similar to us in terms of background, opinions, interests, and values. This similarity principle explains why salespeople are trained to find common ground with potential customers and why we tend to form friendships with people who share our interests. To increase liking, look for genuine points of connection with others and emphasize shared experiences, values, and perspectives. Compliments and praise also increase liking even when people suspect the compliment may have an ulterior motive. We have a strong desire to feel good about ourselves, and we tend to like people who make us feel this way. However, compliments must be genuine to be truly effective. Hollow flattery is often detected and can backfire. Look for things you genuinely appreciate about others and express this appreciation sincerely. Familiarity also breeds liking. The more exposure we have to something or someone, the more we tend to like it, assuming our initial experiences are neutral or positive. This mere exposure effect explains why repetition is so important in advertising, and why people often develop preferences for things simply because they are familiar. To increase liking, increase the frequency of positive interactions. Commitment and consistency, the power of following through. Once people make a commitment, they feel powerful internal and external pressure to behave consistently with that commitment. This drive for consistency is deeply rooted in human psychology, and it influences our behavior in ways we are often not aware of. We want to see ourselves as consistent people, and we want others to see us that way too. This desire for consistency can be harnessed to create lasting behavior change. The commitment and consistency principle is why getting a small yes often leads to bigger yeses later. Once someone agrees to something small, they become more likely to agree to something larger that is consistent with their initial commitment. This is known as the foot in the door technique. A person who agrees to put a small sign in their window becomes more likely to agree to put a large sign on their lawn because they have already identified themselves as someone who supports the cause. Written commitments are particularly powerful because they create a physical record of the commitment, and because the act of writing something down increases psychological investment. Public commitments are even more powerful because they add social pressure to the internal pressure for consistency. When we make a commitment in front of others, we feel even more obligated to follow through because failing to do so would damage our reputation and self-image. Remember when you publicly announced a goal, maybe on social media or to friends, and then felt compelled to follow through even when you no longer wanted to? Think about a time when you continued reading a book you were not enjoying simply because you had already invested time in starting it. Have you ever stayed in a situation longer than you should have? A job, a relationship, a project? Because leaving would have meant admitting that your original decision was wrong? Consider the opinions you hold simply because you expressed them once and now feel obligated to defend them. Think about that subscription you kept paying for because you signed up and cancelling felt like admitting a mistake. Remember when a salesperson got you to agree to small things before asking for a bigger commitment, and you found yourself saying yes almost automatically? These experiences reveal how the commitment and consistency principle operates in your life, how your past decisions create pressure to act in ways that align with those decisions, even when changing course would be wiser. To use the commitment and consistency principle, start small. Get people to make minor commitments that are aligned with the larger behavior you ultimately want. Encourage public and written commitments when possible. Frame requests in terms of consistency with previous commitments or expressed values. People are much more likely to do something if they can see it as consistent with who they already are or who they want to be. The art of strategic silence. One of the most underrated psychological tools is the strategic use of silence. Most people are uncomfortable with silence in conversations and will rush to fill it, often revealing more than they intended or making concessions they had not planned to make. Learning to be comfortable with silence gives you a significant advantage in negotiations, discussions, and interrogations. When you ask a question and the other person gives an incomplete or evasive answer, resist the urge to immediately follow up with another question or to fill the silence yourself. Instead, simply remain silent and maintain eye contact. The social pressure to continue talking is powerful, and most people will elaborate on their answer, providing additional information or making their position clearer. This technique is used by skilled interviewers, therapists, and negotiators around the world. Silence can also be used to create emphasis and gravitas. A pause before making an important point draws attention to what you are about to say. A pause after making a point allows it to sink in and signals that what you have said deserves consideration. Speakers who use silence effectively are often perceived as more confident and authoritative than those who fill every moment with words. Think about a conversation where someone asked you a question and then just waited, looking at you expectantly. Remember how uncomfortable that silence felt and how you rushed to fill it, perhaps revealing more than you intended. Have you ever been in a negotiation where the other person simply stayed quiet after you made an offer and you found yourself lowering your price or adding extras just to break the tension? Consider that job interview where the interviewer paused after your answer and you kept talking, elaborating unnecessarily, maybe even talking yourself out of the position. Think about a time when a parent, teacher, or boss just looked at you silently and you confessed to something or agreed to something you had not planned to. That awkward pause that made you babble, that expectant silence that made you concede, that quiet moment that made you feel compelled to explain yourself further. These were all instances of strategic silence being used on you, whether intentionally or not, and you responded exactly as psychology would predict. In negotiations, silence after receiving an offer can be particularly powerful. It creates uncertainty in the other party about whether their offer is acceptable. This uncertainty often leads them to sweeten the deal before you have even responded. The key is to appear thoughtful and considerate, rather than hostile or disengaged. Your silence should signal that you are carefully considering what has been said, not that you are refusing to engage. Mirroring and matching building unconscious rapport. Human beings are naturally inclined to like people who are similar to them, and one powerful way to signal similarity is through mirroring and matching. This involves subtly adopting the body language gestures, speech patterns, and energy level of the person you are interacting with. When done well, mirroring creates a sense of connection and rapport that the other person feels but cannot quite identify. They simply feel that you understand them and that you are on the same wavelength. Mirroring happens naturally when people are in rapport. Watch any two friends in deep conversation and you will notice that their body language tends to synchronize. They lean in at the same time, use similar gestures, and match each other's energy. By consciously adopting these patterns, you can accelerate the rapport building process and create connection more quickly. Think about a conversation where you felt an instant connection with someone, where they just seemed to get you on a deep level. Without realizing it, you may have noticed that they were sitting like you, using similar gestures, speaking at the same pace. Have you ever met a salesperson who somehow made you feel completely comfortable, only to later realize they had been subtly mimicking your body language the entire time? Consider those friends with whom conversations flow effortlessly. You probably mirror each other naturally, synchronizing your movements and speech patterns without conscious thought. Think about a time when someone's energy felt off, when they were too loud when you were quiet, or too slow when you were energetic. That mismatch created distance, even if the words they spoke were perfectly fine. Every time you have felt deeply understood by someone, there is a good chance that mirroring and matching were happening beneath your awareness, creating the invisible bond of rapport. To mirror effectively, observe the other person's body language and gradually adopt similar postures and gestures. If they lean forward, you lean forward. If they speak slowly and thoughtfully, you do the same. If they use certain words or phrases, repeatedly incorporate those into your own speech. The key is subtlety. The mirroring should be natural and gradual, not an obvious imitation that feels mocking or insincere. Pay attention to the person's energy level and emotional state as well. If they are excited and animated, matching their energy will create connection. If they are calm and reflective, bringing too much energy can feel jarring and create distance. The goal is to meet people where they are emotionally and then, if appropriate, lead them toward a different state once rapport is established. The Ben Franklin effect, asking for favors. Conventional wisdom suggests that if you want someone to like you, you should do nice things for them. However, psychological research reveals a counterintuitive truth. People who do a favor for you actually come to like you more. This phenomenon is known as the Ben Franklin effect because Franklin reportedly used it to win over a political rival by asking to borrow a rare book from the rival's library. The Ben Franklin effect works because of cognitive dissonance. When someone does a favor for you, their mind needs to justify this action. Why would I help this person? They ask themselves unconsciously. The most readily available answer is because I must like them. Thus, the act of helping someone leads to actually liking them more. This is a powerful reversal of the assumed cause and effect relationship between liking and helping. Have you ever noticed that someone you helped seemed to like you more afterward, not the other way around? Think about a coworker you did not particularly like, but after they asked for your advice and you spent time helping them, your feelings toward them warmed. Remember when someone borrowed something from you, maybe a book or a tool, and your relationship with them actually improved as a result. Consider a time when you asked someone for a small favor, perhaps directions or a recommendation, and they became friendlier toward you afterward. You might have experienced this in reverse too, helping someone and then finding yourself thinking more positively about them, even though logically it should be the other way around. This counterintuitive pattern is the Ben Franklin effect in action. Every time you have helped someone and then felt more connected to them, your mind was resolving the cognitive dissonance by deciding that you must like them. Otherwise, why would you have helped? To use the Ben Franklin effect, ask people for small favors. This could be asking for advice, seeking their opinion, or requesting a small bit of help. The favor should be something that is easy for them to provide, but meaningful enough to register psychologically. When they help you, they will unconsciously justify this help by deciding that they must like you. Over time, these small favors can build genuine positive feelings. This principle is particularly useful when trying to build a relationship with someone who may be neutral or even slightly hostile toward you. Rather than trying to win them over by doing favors for them, ask them for help. Their act of helping will shift their perception of you in a positive direction. Of course, you should be genuinely grateful for any help you receive and look for opportunities to reciprocate in the future. Framing how context shapes perception. The way information is framed significantly influences how people perceive and respond to it. The same facts presented in different ways can lead to completely different decisions. This is not about deception, but about recognizing that context matters enormously in how we process information. By choosing your frames carefully, you can present information in ways that are more likely to achieve your desired outcomes. One of the most well-documented framing effects involves gains versus losses. People respond very differently to the same information depending on whether it is framed as a potential gain or a potential loss. Research shows that the prospect of losing something is roughly twice as motivating as the prospect of gaining something of equal value. This means that framing outcomes in terms of what people stand to lose rather than what they stand to gain is often more persuasive. For example, imagine you are trying to convince someone to take action on their health. Saying you will gain 5 extra years of healthy life is less motivating than saying you could lose 5 years of your life. The same information framed differently produces different responses. Understanding this allows you to present information in ways that are more likely to motivate action. Remember when you chose ground beef labeled as 90% lean over the identical product labeled as 10% fat. Think about a time when a doctor presented treatment options to you, and your decision was heavily influenced by whether they emphasized survival rates or mortality rates. Have you ever responded differently to the same information just because of how it was presented? Consider that sale item marked as save $50 versus the same item marked as 30% off, and how one framing felt more appealing even though the discount was identical. Think about when a friend described someone new as not boring instead of interesting, and how that subtle framing changed your expectations. Every political message, every advertisement, every pitch you have ever received has been carefully framed to influence your perception. That investment opportunity presented as what you stand to gain versus what you might lose. That insurance policy framed around protection versus cost. These frames have shaped countless decisions throughout your life without you ever noticing the manipulation. Framing also involves the broader context in which information is presented. Presenting an option alongside inferior alternatives makes it look more attractive. Presenting it alongside superior alternatives makes it look less attractive. Skilled persuaders carefully choose what comparisons to draw and what reference points to establish. They understand that nothing is evaluated in isolation, and they use this knowledge to present their options in the most favorable light. The contrast principle, making things look better or worse. Our perceptions are strongly influenced by what we have just experienced. This contrast principle means that something can seem very different depending on what came before it. A moderately warm room feels hot after being in a cold room. A moderately attractive person looks less attractive after you have been looking at models. A moderately priced item seems cheap after you have been looking at expensive items. Understanding this principle allows you to sequence experiences and information strategically. Salespeople use the contrast principle constantly. After selling you an expensive suit, they offer you accessories like ties and shirts. Compared to the price of the suit, these items seem inexpensive even if they are priced higher than comparable items elsewhere. Real estate agents often show disappointing properties first before showing you the one they really want to sell. After seeing the bad options, the good option looks even better. Think about that time you tried on an expensive suit, and afterward the ties and shirts the salesperson showed you seemed reasonably priced by comparison, even though they were marked up significantly. Remember when a real estate agent showed you 2 disappointing houses before revealing the one they really wanted to sell, which suddenly looked amazing by comparison? Have you ever felt that your salary was fair until you learned what a colleague was making, and then the same paycheck suddenly felt inadequate? Consider when you came home from a stressful trip and your ordinary house felt like a paradise, or when you returned from a vacation and your daily life felt unbearably boring. Think about that average-looking meal that tasted delicious because you were starving, or that lukewarm shower that felt hot because you had just been out in the cold. Every perception you have is colored by what came immediately before it. That okay apartment that seemed great after viewing terrible ones. That moderate price that seemed cheap after hearing the high anchor. These were all the contrast principle at work, shaping your judgments without your awareness. You can use the contrast principle by thinking carefully about the sequence in which you present options or information. If you want something to look good, present it after something worse. If you want something to seem reasonable, present it after something more extreme. The order of presentation matters enormously, and failing to account for contrast effects can undermine even the best proposals. The contrast principle also applies to negotiations. An extreme opening offer makes subsequent offers seem more reasonable by comparison. A large concession makes you look more cooperative and reasonable even if your new position is still advantageous to you. Understanding how contrast shapes perception allows you to sequence your moves strategically and create the impressions you want to create. The illusion of choice, guiding decisions. People have a strong need to feel that they are in control of their own decisions. This need for autonomy is so powerful that people will sometimes make suboptimal choices just to assert their freedom. Understanding this need allows you to guide decisions while still leaving people feeling that they have chosen freely. The key is to structure choices in ways that lead naturally to your preferred outcome while still giving the other person options. One effective technique is to offer multiple options that all lead to outcomes you would be happy with. Would you prefer to meet on Tuesday or Thursday? Both work for you, but the other person feels they have made a choice. Would you like the standard package or the premium package? Both are profitable for you, but the customer feels in control. By controlling the options, you can guide decisions while respecting people's need for autonomy. Another technique involves strategic ordering of options. Research shows that people tend to choose options in the middle of a list and options that are presented first or last, depending on the context. Understanding these tendencies allows you to position your preferred option where it is most likely to be chosen. This is not manipulation because you are still offering genuine choices, but it is strategic in how those choices are presented. Remember when a salesperson asked whether you wanted to pay with cash or credit, and you did not notice that they had skipped right past whether you wanted to buy at all? Think about a parent asking a child, "Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt?" when the real agenda was simply getting the child dressed. Have you ever been given a choice between two meeting times, both of which worked for the other person, and felt like you were in control of the decision? Consider those restaurant menus with 3 price tiers, where most people choose the middle option because it feels like a balanced choice, even though the menu was designed to steer them exactly there. Think about when a boss asked whether you wanted to take on the extra project now or after lunch, when saying no was never really presented as an option. Every time you have felt like you made a free choice, but the options were carefully curated to lead you in a particular direction, you were experiencing the illusion of choice. You felt autonomous, but the outcome was guided from the start. The illusion of choice can also involve yes questions, where both possible answers lead in the direction you want. Do you want to start now or after lunch presupposes that starting is not in question, only the timing. Do you want to pay by cash or credit presupposes that paying is not in question, only the method. These questions are powerful because they bypass resistance by assuming agreement and focusing only on implementation details. Emotional contagion, spreading feelings. Emotions are contagious. When you are around someone who is happy or excited, you tend to feel happier and more excited yourself. When you are around someone who is anxious or depressed, those feelings can spread to you as well. This emotional contagion happens automatically and unconsciously through processes that scientists are still working to fully understand. What we do know is that the emotions you bring to an interaction significantly influence the emotions of everyone involved. Research has shown that emotional contagion can happen in a matter of seconds and does not require any verbal communication. Simply observing someone's facial expressions and body language is enough to catch their emotional state. This means that your mood and demeanor set the tone for your interactions regardless of what you actually say. If you want to create positive interactions, you need to bring positive emotions to them. Think about a time when you walked into a room and immediately felt tense, only to realize that an argument had just taken place. Remember entering a party where everyone was laughing and feeling your own mood lift instantly, even before anyone spoke to you. Have you noticed how your mood changes when you spend time with someone who is anxious versus someone who is calm? Consider that coworker whose negativity seems to infect the entire office, or that friend whose enthusiasm is contagious. Think about watching a sad movie and finding tears streaming down your face, not because of your own problems, but because you caught the emotion from the characters on screen. Remember feeling your heart race while watching someone else in a stressful situation, your body responding to their emotion as if it were your own. Every time someone else's mood has mysteriously become your mood, every time you have felt emotions that did not originate within you, you were experiencing emotional contagion, the invisible transmission of feelings from one person to another. The implications of emotional contagion for influence are significant. If you want people to feel good about interacting with you, you need to radiate positive emotions yourself. If you want people to feel calm and confident, your own calmness and confidence will help create that state in them. If you want people to feel excited about an opportunity, your genuine excitement is more persuasive than any words you could say. Managing your own emotional state is therefore a crucial skill for influence. Before important interactions, take time to get yourself into the emotional state you want to spread. This might involve remembering positive experiences, visualizing successful outcomes, or engaging in physical activities that boost your mood. The emotions you bring to an interaction are not just your own concern, they become the emotional backdrop for everyone involved. The halo effect, how one trait colors everything. When we perceive someone positively in one dimension, this positive perception tends to spill over into other dimensions as well. This halo effect means that a person who is physically attractive is also assumed to be smarter, kinder, and more trustworthy, even when there is no evidence for these assumptions. A person who is successful in one area is assumed to be competent in unrelated areas. Our minds seek coherence, and once we have formed a positive impression, we tend to see everything about that person in a positive light. The halo effect works in reverse as well. If we perceive someone negatively in one dimension, that negative perception colors everything else. A single flaw or mistake can cause people to doubt your abilities across the board, even in areas that have nothing to do with the original failing. This is why first impressions are so important and why maintaining a positive reputation is so valuable. One highly visible positive trait can create a halo that elevates perceptions of everything else about you. Remember when you assumed that an attractive person was also intelligent, kind, and trustworthy, without any evidence beyond their appearance. Think about a time when someone's impressive job title made you take their opinions seriously on topics completely unrelated to their expertise. Have you ever liked everything about a person simply because they were good at one thing you admired? Consider that celebrity whose political opinions you valued, even though being famous for acting or singing gave them no special insight into policy. Think about a student who excelled in one subject and was assumed by teachers to be excellent across the board. Remember when one mistake by a colleague suddenly made you question their competence in all areas, even those where they had consistently performed well? Every time you have judged someone's entire character based on a single outstanding trait, positive or negative, you were falling prey to the halo effect. That brilliant person you assumed was also ethical. That attractive person you assumed was also successful. These assumptions were mental shortcuts that may have led you astray. To leverage the halo effect, identify your strongest positive traits and make sure these are visible early in interactions. If you are exceptionally good at something, let people know. If you have impressive credentials, mention them. If you have a warm and likable personality, let it shine through. The positive perception created by your strengths will tend to color perceptions of your other qualities as well. Be aware of the halo effect when evaluating others as well. Just because someone is attractive, successful, or likable does not mean they are competent or trustworthy in all areas. Try to evaluate different traits independently rather than letting one strong impression influence all your judgments. This awareness helps you make better decisions and avoid being manipulated by those who cultivate strong first impressions to mask weaknesses elsewhere. Strategic self-deprecation. While highlighting your strengths is important, there is also power in strategically acknowledging your weaknesses. This may seem counterintuitive, but admitting minor flaws or limitations can actually increase your credibility and likability. When you acknowledge a weakness, people perceive you as more honest and trustworthy. They reason that if you are willing to admit negatives, you must be telling the truth about the positives. Strategic self-deprecation works because it violates expectations. People expect others to present themselves in the best possible light, so when someone admits a flaw, it stands out as refreshingly honest. This is why some of the most effective advertising campaigns lead with their products' weaknesses. Avis famously admitted that they were number 2 in the car rental market and used this admission to argue that they tried harder. This honest admission made all their other claims more believable. Think about a speaker who began by admitting their nervousness and how that vulnerability actually made you trust them more. Remember a salesperson who acknowledged a flaw in their product before you could discover it, and how that honesty made you believe everything else they said. Have you ever trusted someone more because they admitted a weakness, even though logically that admission should have lowered your confidence in them? Consider that job candidate who mentioned a gap in their resume before being asked, and how their forthrightness made them seem more honest than those who tried to hide their imperfections. Think about a friend who said, "I am not great at this, but let me try," and how you found yourself rooting for them more than for someone who projected pure confidence. Every time someone's admission of a flaw has paradoxically increased your trust in them. You were experiencing strategic self-deprecation at work. Their willingness to show weakness signaled that their strengths must be genuine. The key to strategic self-deprecation is choosing the right weaknesses to admit. You should acknowledge weaknesses that are minor and that do not undermine your core competence or value proposition. Ideally, the weakness you admit should actually be related to a strength. "I work too hard" admits a flaw while implying dedication. "I am sometimes too honest" admits a flaw while implying trustworthiness. The weakness should make you seem more human and relatable without causing people to question your ability to deliver. Self-deprecation also needs to be used sparingly and with the right tone. Too much self-criticism can come across as insecure or fishing for compliments. The tone should be confident and matter-of-fact, not apologetic or self-pitying. You are simply acknowledging reality in a way that demonstrates self-awareness and honesty. Done well, this increases trust and likability. Done poorly, it undermines your credibility and authority. The power of uncertainty, strategic vagueness. While clarity is often valuable, there are situations where strategic vagueness can be more effective. When you leave some things unsaid or undefined, you create space for people to fill in the blanks with their own hopes and interpretations. This can make your proposals more attractive because people project their own desires onto the undefined elements. It can also give you flexibility to adapt as situations evolve. Politicians are masters of strategic vagueness. They make promises that sound meaningful, but are vague enough that different supporters can interpret them differently. Change we can believe in means something different to everyone, but it resonates broadly because everyone can see their own hopes reflected in it. While this can be used manipulatively, it can also be a legitimate way to build consensus around broad goals while leaving room for negotiation on specifics. Strategic vagueness can also be useful in negotiations. Leaving some terms undefined gives you flexibility to claim more favorable interpretations later. Keeping your priorities unclear prevents the other party from knowing exactly what you will fight for and what you will concede. Maintaining uncertainty about your alternatives keeps the other party from knowing how much leverage they have. Of course, there are contexts where clarity and specificity are essential, but understanding when vagueness serves your interests is also valuable. Remember a job posting that sounded exciting precisely because it was vague, allowing you to imagine the perfect role. Think about that person you dated who remained slightly mysterious and how their elusiveness made them more intriguing than someone who revealed everything immediately. Have you ever been drawn to a product or experience because it promised something transformative without specifying exactly what? Consider those political slogans that inspired you, even though they were intentionally vague enough to mean different things to different people. Think about a movie trailer that showed just enough to make you curious without revealing the plot, versus one that showed too much and killed your interest. Remember a negotiation where you held back your full position and how that uncertainty gave you leverage. Every time ambiguity has increased your interest rather than decreased it, every time you have projected your own hopes onto something undefined, you were experiencing the power of strategic vagueness, the way uncertainty can create engagement and attraction. The power of uncertainty also applies to creating interest and intrigue. When everything is spelled out, there is nothing left to wonder about. But when there is mystery and ambiguity, people become curious and engaged. This is why stories that leave something to the imagination are often more compelling than those that explain everything. It is why people who are somewhat mysterious are often more attractive than those who are completely open. Strategic uncertainty creates engagement and keeps people interested. Cognitive load and decision fatigue. The human brain has limited processing capacity, and when that capacity is taxed, our ability to make good decisions deteriorates. This phenomenon, known as cognitive load, has important implications for influence. When people are mentally tired, they become more susceptible to suggestion, more likely to take shortcuts, and more likely to defer to authority. Understanding cognitive load allows you to time your requests strategically and to simplify choices in ways that guide decisions. Decision fatigue is a related concept. Every decision we make depletes a limited mental resource, and as this resource is depleted, our decision quality suffers. Research shows that judges make harsher decisions later in the day after making many decisions. Shoppers make worse choices after extended shopping sessions. This suggests that if you want someone to make a careful, thoughtful decision, you should approach them early in the day when they are fresh. If you want someone to take a shortcut or defer to your recommendation, approach them later when they are tired. Think about the end of a long workday when you found yourself agreeing to things you would have questioned in the morning. Remember shopping after hours of browsing, when you finally just grabbed something to be done with it. Have you noticed that you make worse food choices late at night after a day of making countless other decisions? Consider that important conversation you had when you were mentally exhausted and how you said things you later regretted. Think about a salesperson who kept you engaged for hours until your resistance crumbled, or a negotiation that dragged on until you conceded just to end it. Remember trying to make a complex decision after dealing with several other problems, and how you just went with the easiest option rather than the best one. Every time you have made a poor choice because you were mentally depleted, every time you have given in because you were too tired to argue, you were experiencing decision fatigue. Your willpower was exhausted, and someone or something benefited from your weakened state. You can also manage cognitive load by simplifying choices. Too many options overwhelm people and can actually reduce satisfaction with whatever choice they make. By curating options and providing clear recommendations, you make decisions easier and increase the likelihood that people will choose what you recommend. This is not about removing choice, but about presenting choices in ways that do not overwhelm. Be aware of your own cognitive load as well. When you are mentally tired, you are more susceptible to influence and more likely to make poor decisions. Important negotiations or decisions should be scheduled when you are at your mental best, not at the end of a long, exhausting day. Taking breaks, maintaining energy levels, and protecting your mental resources are all important for maintaining your own good judgment. The lowball technique, getting commitment before revealing costs. The lowball technique involves getting someone to commit to something before revealing the full costs or requirements of that commitment. Once people have made a commitment, they tend to stick with it even when additional costs are revealed. This is because the commitment changes how they see themselves and the decision. They begin to generate their own reasons for following through that go beyond the initial terms. When additional costs are later revealed, these self-generated reasons help maintain commitment. Car dealerships are notorious for using this technique. A salesperson offers you a great deal on a car and you commit to buying it. Then during the paperwork process, various additional costs are added. The dealer explains that the manager would not approve the original price, or that there were fees that had not been mentioned. By this point, you have already started to see yourself as the owner of that car, and the additional costs seem like minor obstacles rather than reasons to walk away. Remember when you agreed to buy a car at a great price, only to discover during paperwork that various fees and add-ons raised the cost significantly, but you bought it anyway. Think about that job you accepted based on a salary figure, only to learn later about deductions and requirements that had not been mentioned. But you started anyway because you had already committed. Have you ever agreed to help with something that sounded simple, only to discover it was much more complicated, but you followed through because you had already said yes? Consider that vacation package that seemed affordable until you learned about all the extras, or that phone plan that advertised one price but billed another. Think about the project that was supposed to take an hour but took all day, yet you finished it because you had already invested effort. Remember feeling stuck because walking away would mean admitting you should not have agreed in the first place. Every time you have honored a commitment despite learning information that would have changed your original decision, you experienced the lowball technique. Your initial commitment trapped you even when the terms changed. While the lowball technique can be effective, it carries significant ethical risks. People who feel deceived by hidden costs may comply in the moment, but they are likely to feel resentment and may damage your reputation or refuse to do business with you in the future. If you use this technique at all, it should be for costs that are genuinely unexpected rather than deliberately hidden, and you should be prepared for people to walk away when the full costs are revealed. Understanding the lowball technique also helps you defend against it. When making commitments, be aware that additional costs may be revealed later. Ask explicitly about all costs and requirements before committing. Be willing to walk away if the final terms are significantly different from what was initially presented. Do not let sunk costs or self-generated justifications trap you in a bad deal. Creating urgency and deadlines. Deadlines and time pressure are powerful motivators because they activate the scarcity principle and force decisions that might otherwise be postponed indefinitely. When there is no urgency, people tend to delay decisions, especially difficult ones. By creating a legitimate deadline, you can move people from consideration to action. This is not about pressuring people into bad decisions, but about providing the impetus needed for them to make decisions they would benefit from making. The most effective deadlines are those that have real consequences and cannot simply be extended. Artificial deadlines that can be easily ignored or postponed have much less motivating power. When establishing a deadline, explain why it exists and what will happen if it passes. This adds credibility and makes the time pressure feel legitimate rather than manipulative. Urgency can also be created through competition. Knowing that others are interested in the same opportunity activates the fear of missing out and motivates action. We are all competing for this same position creates more urgency than take your time deciding. However, this technique should only be used when the competition is real. False claims of competing interest will damage your credibility if discovered. Think about every time you have bought something because the sale was ending today. Remember that course you enrolled in because registration was closing, that ticket you bought because only a few seats remained, that deal you grabbed because the countdown timer was about to hit 0. Have you ever made a major decision faster than you should have because someone told you the opportunity would not last? Consider the real estate agent who told you another buyer was interested, the recruiter who said the position would fill quickly, the salesperson who mentioned the price was going up tomorrow. Think about all the times you have felt pressure to act now and how many of those deadlines turned out to be artificial or flexible. Remember that subscription you signed up for during a special offer that turned out to be always available. Every time urgency has pushed you to decide before you were ready, every time a deadline has short-circuited your careful evaluation, you were responding to manufactured time pressure designed to prevent you from thinking too carefully about your decision. Be strategic about when you create urgency. If someone is not yet convinced of the value of what you are offering, adding time pressure may simply lead them to say no, rather than motivating them to say yes. Urgency works best when someone is already interested, but is procrastinating on making a decision. In those cases, a deadline provides the nudge needed to move from interest to action. The power of questions. Questions are one of the most powerful tools for influence because they shape thinking while leaving people feeling in control. A well-crafted question can lead someone to a conclusion that they will hold more strongly than if you had simply told them the same thing. When people arrive at insights through their own thinking, they own those insights in a way that externally provided information can never match. Socratic questioning, named after the ancient philosopher, involves asking a series of questions that lead the other person to discover the truth for themselves. Rather than telling someone they are wrong, you ask questions that expose the contradictions or gaps in their thinking. What would happen if everyone did that? How does that fit with what you said earlier? Have you considered this alternative? This approach is less likely to trigger defensiveness and more likely to create genuine persuasion. Remember when someone asked you a question that made you completely reconsider your position, even though they never directly told you that you were wrong? Think about a teacher or mentor whose questions led you to discover insights that felt like your own, even though they were guiding you the entire time. Have you ever answered a leading question without noticing that your answer committed you to a position you had not intended to take? Consider that survey that asked whether you cared about your family's safety before trying to sell you insurance. Think about a salesperson who asked about your priorities and then used your own answers to justify their recommendation. Remember a conversation where someone asked what would have to be true for you to change your mind, and how that question made you actually consider changing your mind. Every time a question has shaped your thinking more powerfully than any statement could have. Every time you have arrived at a conclusion through someone else's questions without realizing you were being guided, you experience the power of questions to direct thought while leaving you feeling in control. Questions can also be used to gather information and understand the other person's perspective. What is most important to you? What concerns do you have? What would need to be true for you to feel comfortable with this? The answers to these questions tell you what you need to address in order to be persuasive. They also make the other person feel heard and understood, which increases rapport and openness to influence. Leading questions contain assumptions that shape the answer. When did you first notice the problem assumes there is a problem. How much do you want to improve assumes they want to improve. These questions can be useful for guiding conversations, but they should be used carefully. If the assumption is wrong, the question can feel manipulative. The best questions are those that genuinely seek to understand while also guiding thinking in productive directions. Storytelling and narrative persuasion. Stories are far more persuasive than facts and arguments alone. When people hear a story, they become absorbed in it, and their critical defenses relax. They experience the events of the story vicariously, and the conclusions feel like their own insights rather than externally imposed arguments. This is why skilled persuaders, from advertisers to politicians, rely heavily on stories to make their points. The power of stories comes from several sources. First, stories are memorable. People remember narratives far better than they remember lists of facts or logical arguments. Second, stories are emotionally engaging. They create feelings that motivate action in ways that dry information cannot. Third, stories create identification. When we hear about a character facing challenges, we put ourselves in their place and feel what they feel. Think about an advertisement that told a story and moved you emotionally, even though you knew it was trying to sell you something. Remember a speaker whose personal story completely changed your mind on an issue when facts and arguments had left you unmoved. Have you ever made a decision based on a single compelling story, even when statistics suggested a different conclusion? Consider how a news story about one person's experience can influence your beliefs more than data about millions of people. Think about the charity that showed you one child's face rather than citing numbers about poverty. Remember that product testimonial that resonated because it told a story similar to your own. Every time a narrative has bypassed your critical thinking and spoken directly to your emotions, every time you have been persuaded by a story when logic failed, you experienced the power of storytelling. Your mind processed the story differently than it would have processed an argument, and your defenses remained down because you were engaged with characters rather than analyzing claims. To use storytelling effectively, choose stories that illustrate the point you want to make. Personal stories about your own experiences are particularly powerful because they are unique and demonstrate vulnerability. Stories about people similar to your audience are also effective because of the identification they create. The story should have a clear structure with a beginning, middle, and end, and the point should emerge naturally from the narrative rather than being tacked on artificially. Details make stories come alive. Sensory details about what things looked like, sounded like, and felt like help listeners visualize the story and become immersed in it. Emotional details about what the characters were thinking and feeling create empathy and connection. Specific details are more memorable and believable than vague generalities. However, too many details can bog down the story, so choose the details that are most vivid and relevant to your point. Pattern interrupts breaking expected scripts. Much of social interaction follows predictable scripts. We know what to expect when someone greets us, when a salesperson approaches us, when a meeting begins. These scripts allow us to navigate social situations efficiently, but they also create opportunities for influence. When you break the expected pattern, you capture attention and create an opening to influence how the interaction unfolds. A pattern interrupt works by doing something unexpected that forces the other person out of autopilot mode. Instead of the expected response to, "How are you?" try responding with something unusual like, "Today is the best day of my life." Instead of the expected sales pitch, try starting with a surprising admission or an intriguing question. The unexpected response captures attention and creates curiosity, which opens the door to deeper engagement. Humor is a particularly effective pattern interrupt. A well-timed joke breaks tension, creates positive feelings, and makes you memorable. It also demonstrates social intelligence and confidence. However, humor carries risks if it falls flat or offends. The safest humor is self-deprecating or situational rather than targeting others. Read the room carefully before using humor and be prepared to move on gracefully if it does not land. Remember when someone gave an unexpected response to your greeting and you found yourself more engaged in the conversation that followed. Think about a presentation that started with something surprising rather than the usual introduction, and how your attention was captured immediately. Have you ever been snapped out of autopilot by something unusual, only to find yourself more receptive to what came next? Consider that salesperson who opened with a joke or an odd question instead of the pitch you were prepared to resist. Think about a teacher who did something unexpected on the first day of class, instantly distinguishing themselves from every other teacher you had. Remember that time someone broke the tension in a difficult conversation by saying something completely off script. Every time an unexpected moment has reset your expectations and opened you to new possibilities. Every time someone has captured your attention by violating the normal patterns you were prepared for, you experienced a pattern interrupt. Your prepared defenses were designed for the expected script, and when that script was broken, you had to engage freshly with the unexpected. Pattern interrupts can also be used to break unproductive patterns in ongoing interactions. If a conversation is going in circles, a sudden change of topic or approach can restart it more productively. If a negotiation is deadlocked, an unexpected concession or creative proposal can break the logjam. The key is recognizing when the current pattern is not serving you and having the creativity to introduce something unexpected. Reading body language. Words convey only a fraction of the information in human communication. The rest comes from body language, including facial expressions, posture gestures, and movements. Learning to read these nonverbal signals gives you access to information that people may not be willing or able to express verbally. It allows you to sense discomfort, interest, deception, and many other states that inform how you should respond. Facial expressions are the most information-rich channel of nonverbal communication. Micro-expressions are brief, involuntary expressions that reveal true emotions even when someone is trying to hide them. These micro-expressions last only a fraction of a second, but they can be learned to recognize with practice. Common micro-expressions include flashes of contempt, fear, surprise, or disgust that are quickly masked by more socially acceptable expressions. Think about a time when you knew someone was lying, even though their words seemed convincing. Remember sensing that someone was angry or upset before they said anything, just from how they were sitting or standing. Have you ever felt that something was off in an interaction without being able to explain why? Consider that job interview where you knew you had lost them before they said a word, just from a subtle shift in their posture. Think about detecting romantic interest through eye contact and body orientation, or sensing disapproval through crossed arms and averted gaze. Remember watching a couple and knowing their relationship was in trouble based on how they physically related to each other. Every time you have read between the lines of what people said to understand what they really meant, every time your gut told you something that contradicted someone's words, you were reading body language. This skill has protected you from deception, guided you in social situations, and given you information that words alone would never have revealed. Posture and body orientation reveal interest and comfort levels. People lean toward things they like and away from things they dislike. Open postures with uncrossed arms and legs suggest comfort and receptivity, while closed postures suggest defensiveness or discomfort. The direction someone's feet are pointing often indicates where they want to go, even if their upper body is oriented differently. It is important to read body language in clusters, rather than interpreting single signals in isolation. Crossed arms might mean defensiveness, but they might also mean the person is cold. Look for multiple consistent signals before drawing conclusions. Also consider the baseline. Some people are naturally more expressive or reserved than others. What matters is changes from their baseline, not how they compare to some average. The psychology of names. A person's name is one of the sweetest sounds they can hear. Using someone's name creates a sense of personal connection and makes them feel recognized and valued. It cuts through the noise of anonymous interactions and signals that you see them as an individual. This simple technique can significantly increase rapport and the effectiveness of your communication. Dale Carnegie emphasized the importance of using names in his classic book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He argued that remembering and using people's names is one of the simplest and most effective ways to make them feel important. Research supports this claim, showing that people respond more positively and are more cooperative when their name is used appropriately in conversation. Remember how it felt when someone you had just met remembered and used your name. Think about the warmth and connection that created, compared to being addressed generically or having your name forgotten. Have you noticed how much more positively you respond when someone addresses you by name rather than with a generic greeting? Consider that salesperson who used your name throughout the conversation and how much more personal the interaction felt. Think about teachers, managers, or leaders who made a point of learning and using names, and how that simple act created loyalty and connection. Remember the difference between receiving an email that began with your name versus one that began with a generic greeting. Every time the use of your name has made you feel recognized and valued, every time you have warmed to someone who took the trouble to learn and remember your name, you experience the power of this simple but profound psychological tool. Your name is your identity, and those who honor it earn your attention and goodwill. To use names effectively, first you must actually remember them. When you meet someone new, repeat their name immediately to help fix it in memory. Associate the name with a distinctive feature, or create a mental image that links the name to the person. Write names down if possible. The effort you put into remembering names pays dividends in every future interaction with that person. Use names strategically throughout conversations. Using someone's name at the beginning gets their attention. Using it at the end makes the interaction feel more personal and memorable. However, do not overuse names, as this can feel forced and insincere. The right frequency depends on the context and your relationship with the person. In general, a few strategic uses are more effective than constant repetition. The art of active listening. Most people think of influence as something you do through speaking, but some of the most powerful influence happens through listening. When you truly listen to someone, you make them feel valued and understood. This creates rapport and trust, which are the foundations of influence. Active listening also gives you crucial information about what the other person wants, needs, fears, and values. This information allows you to tailor your communication in ways that resonate with them. Active listening involves much more than simply being quiet while the other person talks. It requires focused attention, genuine curiosity, and engagement with what is being said. Active listeners maintain eye contact, nod at appropriate moments, and use verbal acknowledgements to show they are following along. They ask clarifying questions, summarize what they have heard, and reflect back the emotions they perceive. All of these behaviors signal that you are fully present and genuinely interested. One of the most powerful active listening techniques is reflective listening, where you paraphrase what the other person has said in your own words. This serves multiple purposes. It confirms that you have understood correctly, giving the speaker a chance to clarify if you have misunderstood. It makes the speaker feel heard and validated, and it often prompts them to elaborate further, revealing additional information that can be useful. A simple phrase like, "So what you are saying is," followed by your paraphrase, can dramatically deepen a conversation. Remember a conversation where you felt truly heard, where the other person gave you their full attention and reflected back not just your words, but your feelings. Think about how rare that experience was and how deeply it affected you. Have you noticed how most people are just waiting for their turn to speak, rather than actually listening? Consider times when you shared something important and could tell the other person was distracted, thinking about what they would say next, or simply not engaged. Think about that friend, therapist, or mentor who made you feel completely understood, and how much more you revealed to them because of how they listened. Remember realizing that someone had asked you questions throughout a conversation and you walked away feeling valued, even though they spoke very little themselves. Every time you have felt truly heard and understood, someone was practicing active listening. Every time you have felt dismissed or unheard, that skill was absent. The difference in how these conversations felt reveals the profound power of genuine listening. Resist the urge to formulate your response while the other person is still speaking. This divided attention prevents true listening and often leads to responses that miss the point. Instead, focus entirely on understanding what is being communicated, both verbally and non-verbally. Trust that when it is your turn to speak, the right words will come. This full presence is rare and valuable, and people notice when someone is truly listening to them. It creates a connection that superficial conversation cannot match. Priming and unconscious influence. Our behavior is influenced by subtle environmental cues that we are often completely unaware of. This phenomenon, known as priming, has been demonstrated in hundreds of psychological studies. Exposure to certain words, images, or concepts can unconsciously influence our subsequent thoughts and behaviors. Understanding priming allows you to set the stage for interactions in ways that increase the likelihood of favorable outcomes. In one famous study, participants who were exposed to words associated with elderly people, such as wrinkle, grey, and Florida, subsequently walked more slowly down the hallway when leaving the experiment. They had no conscious awareness that their behavior had been influenced. In another study, people who held a warm beverage rated a stranger as having a warmer personality than those who held a cold beverage. These studies reveal how malleable our perceptions and behaviors are, shaped by factors we do not even notice. Think about how your mood changed after seeing negative news stories and how that mood affected your interactions for the rest of the day without your awareness. Remember walking into a room that smelled like fresh baking and feeling inexplicably warm and nostalgic. Have you noticed how your productivity changes depending on the music playing or the organization of your workspace? Consider that time you felt more generous after seeing others being generous, or more aggressive after exposure to violent content. Think about how store layouts, lighting, and music influence your shopping behavior without your conscious awareness. Remember making decisions that seemed entirely your own, only to later realize you had been primed by something you barely noticed. Every environment you enter is full of cues that shape your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Those days when everything seemed harder, those moments of unexpected optimism, those decisions that seemed to come from nowhere, many of these were influenced by primes operating entirely beneath your conscious awareness. You can use priming ethically by creating environments and contexts that activate the mindsets you want people to have. If you want people to be creative, surround them with art and expose them to creative concepts before the discussion. If you want people to be cooperative, use language that emphasizes teamwork and shared goals. If you want people to be generous, remind them of times when others have been generous to them. These subtle cues can shift behavior without any explicit persuasion. Be aware that priming can also work against you if you are not careful. Negative environments, hostile language, or reminders of conflict can prime people for adversarial behavior. Before important interactions, consider what cues are present in the environment and in your communication. Remove or counteract negative primes and introduce positive ones. This attention to context can make a significant difference in how interactions unfold. The power of labeling. The labels we apply to people have a powerful effect on their behavior. When you label someone positively, they tend to live up to that label. When you label them negatively, they often fulfill that negative expectation as well. This self-fulfilling prophecy occurs because labels shape both how we treat others and how they see themselves. Understanding the power of labeling allows you to use it strategically to bring out the best in people. Research has consistently shown that positive labels improve performance and behavior. In one classic study, teachers were told that certain students were intellectual bloomers who would show unusual gains during the school year. In reality, these students had been selected randomly. By the end of the year, the labeled students actually did show greater improvement than their peers. The teachers' expectations, shaped by the labels, led them to treat these students differently in subtle ways that enhanced their performance. Remember a teacher or parent who told you that you were smart, creative, or talented, and how you lived up to that label throughout your life. Think about negative labels that were applied to you, perhaps that you were shy, bad at math, or not athletic, and how those labels became self-fulfilling prophecies. Have you noticed how people tend to behave according to the labels others give them? Consider a manager who told employees they were top performers and watched their performance actually improve. Think about calling someone reliable and seeing them become more reliable, or calling someone difficult and watching them become more difficult. Remember being labeled as something you did not think you were and gradually growing into that label. Every label that has ever been applied to you has shaped who you became. Those strengths you developed because someone believed you had potential, those limitations you accepted because someone told you they existed, these outcomes were not inevitable. They were created by the power of labeling. You can use labeling by attributing positive qualities to people before asking them to act in accordance with those qualities. You are someone who values fairness, makes the person more likely to act fairly. I know you are the kind of person who follows through on commitments, increases the likelihood of follow-through. These labels give people an identity to live up to, and most people will rise to meet positive expectations, especially when those expectations come from someone whose opinion they value. Be careful about the labels you apply, both to others and to yourself. Negative labels can become self-fulfilling prophecies that limit potential. If you label yourself as bad at math or not creative, you will tend to act in ways that confirm those labels. Similarly, if you label others negatively, you will treat them in ways that elicit the very behavior you expect. Choose your labels wisely, focusing on positive attributes and potential rather than limitations and flaws. Managing resistance and objections. Whenever you try to influence someone, you will encounter resistance. This resistance is natural and should be expected. People resist influence for many reasons. They may disagree with your position, distrust your motives, fear change, or simply want to assert their autonomy. Understanding the sources of resistance allows you to address them effectively, rather than simply pushing harder, which usually increases resistance rather than overcoming it. One of the most effective ways to handle resistance is to acknowledge it openly. When you name and validate someone's concerns, you demonstrate that you understand their perspective. This validation often reduces defensiveness and makes people more open to considering your point of view. You might say something like, "I understand you have concerns about this, and those concerns make sense given your experience." This acknowledgement creates space for a more productive conversation. Think about a time when you raised an objection, and the other person acknowledged it thoughtfully rather than dismissing it, and how that validation made you more open to their perspective. Remember pushing back on something simply because you felt you were being pushed, even though you might have agreed if asked differently. Have you noticed how defensive you become when someone tries to force something on you, versus how receptive you are when you feel your autonomy is respected? Consider that salesperson who addressed your concerns before you even voiced them, anticipating your objections and making you feel understood. Think about being told it is entirely your decision and noticing how much less resistant you felt. Remember a negotiation where acknowledgement of your position paved the way for compromise. Every time you have softened your resistance because someone validated your concerns, every time you have become more cooperative because your freedom to choose was affirmed, you experienced skillful management of resistance. Your objections were not barriers to be overcome through force, but concerns to be understood and addressed. Another powerful technique is to address objections before they are raised. If you know that people are likely to have certain concerns, bring them up yourself and address them proactively. This demonstrates that you have thought carefully about the issue and that you are not trying to hide anything. It also prevents the other person from feeling that they have discovered a flaw in your reasoning, which can make them feel clever and invested in their objection. Sometimes resistance is really about autonomy rather than the specific issue at hand. People push back simply because they feel they are being pushed. In these cases, emphasizing their freedom to choose can reduce resistance dramatically. Phrases like, "It is entirely your decision," "You are free to say no," and "I am not trying to pressure," you can paradoxically increase compliance by affirming the person's autonomy. When people feel free, they are more likely to freely choose what you are suggesting. The negotiation mindset. Negotiation is a fundamental life skill that extends far beyond formal business settings. We negotiate constantly, whether we realize it or not, every time we have a conversation where interests differ. Who chooses the restaurant? How household chores are divided? What projects get priority at work? These are all negotiations. Developing a negotiation mindset means approaching these situations strategically, rather than leaving outcomes to chance. The first principle of effective negotiation is preparation. Before any negotiation, you should understand your own interests, priorities, and alternatives. What do you really want? What are you willing to give up to get it? What will you do if this negotiation fails? You should also try to understand the other party's interests, priorities, and alternatives. What do they want? What pressures are they under? What options do they have? The better you understand both sides, the more creative you can be in finding solutions. Effective negotiators focus on interests rather than positions. A position is what someone says they want. An interest is why they want it. Two people might have opposing positions, but compatible interests. If both parties in a negotiation say they want the window open or closed, their positions are incompatible. But if one wants fresh air and the other wants to avoid a draft, their underlying interests might be satisfied by opening a different window. By exploring interests rather than defending positions, negotiators can often find creative solutions that satisfy everyone. Remember a negotiation where you focused only on your position and reached a frustrating stalemate, versus one where exploring underlying interests revealed creative solutions. Think about times when you walked into a negotiation unprepared and how that affected the outcome. Have you ever discovered that what someone said they wanted was not actually what they needed, and that understanding their true interest changed everything? Consider negotiations where you left value on the table because you did not ask enough questions, or where you discovered trades that made both parties better off. Think about that deal where the other side seemed to get everything they wanted, and you later realized you could have done better with more preparation. Remember a conflict that seemed intractable until someone reframed it in terms of interests rather than positions. Every negotiation in your life, from major business deals to deciding what to have for dinner, has involved the principles we discussed. Those outcomes that felt unfair, those deadlocks that seemed unnecessary, those creative solutions that emerged from nowhere. All of these experiences reflect the presence or absence of a true negotiation mindset. The best negotiators create value before claiming it. Instead of fighting over a fixed pie, they look for ways to expand the pie so that everyone can get more. This requires understanding what each party values and finding trades that create mutual benefit. If I value something that is low cost for you to give, and you value something that is low cost for me to give, we can trade and both be better off. This collaborative approach to negotiation creates better outcomes and better relationships. Using time as a strategic tool. Time is one of the most underutilized tools in influence and negotiations. How you manage time, both yours and others, can significantly affect outcomes. Creating urgency can motivate action, while patience can allow better deals to emerge. Understanding the strategic use of time gives you an additional lever for influence that many people overlook. In negotiations, the party under less time pressure usually has an advantage. If you need to close a deal by a certain date, and the other party knows this, they can wait until that deadline approaches to extract concessions. Conversely, if you know the other party is under time pressure, you can use this to your advantage. This is why skilled negotiators try to understand and manage time constraints on both sides. Think about a negotiation where you were under a deadline and the other party seemed to have all the time in the world, and how that power imbalance affected the outcome. Remember agreeing to something because you felt rushed, only to realize later that the urgency was artificial. Have you noticed how much better your decisions are when you have time to think versus when you are pressured to decide immediately? Consider that pause before responding to an offer that signaled you were not desperate versus times when your quick response revealed your eagerness. Think about strategic delays that allowed emotions to settle and better outcomes to emerge. Remember a negotiation that dragged on until you conceded just to end it. Every time pressure has led you to a decision you later regretted, every time patience allowed a better outcome to unfold, you experience time as a strategic variable. Those who understand this have used it to their advantage in their dealings with you, and you can now recognize when it is happening. Strategic delays can also be useful. Taking time to respond to an offer signals that you are carefully considering it, rather than desperate to accept. Sleeping on important decisions, as the saying goes, often leads to better outcomes because it allows initial emotional reactions to subside and more careful analysis to occur. Conversely, rushing decisions can lead to mistakes and regret. Do not let artificial urgency pressure you into decisions you are not ready to make. At the same time, there are situations where speed creates advantage. Being the first to make an offer anchors the negotiation. Responding quickly to opportunities can secure them before competitors act. The key is to be intentional about time rather than letting it control you. Sometimes speed serves your interests, sometimes patience does. The strategic use of time requires understanding which approach is best in each situation. The psychology of concessions. In any negotiation or exchange, concessions are inevitable. How you make concessions and how you respond to concessions from others significantly affects outcomes. Concessions that are made skillfully can build relationships and create value. Concessions that are made poorly can signal weakness and invite exploitation. Understanding the psychology of concessions allows you to navigate this delicate terrain effectively. The pattern of your concessions matters as much as their substance. Concessions should generally start larger and become smaller as the negotiation progresses. This pattern signals that you are approaching your limit and that further concessions will be difficult to obtain. If your concessions remain the same size or get larger over time, the other party will expect that pattern to continue and will push for more. Concessions should be made reluctantly and with apparent difficulty. If you give something up too easily, the other party will assume it was not valuable to you and will not feel they have gained much. They will also wonder what else you might give up easily. By making concessions slowly and with visible struggle, you increase their perceived value and signal that you have reached or are approaching your limits. Remember when someone made a concession and you felt obligated to make one in return, even though nothing required you to do so. Think about a negotiation where the other party's concessions got smaller and smaller, signaling that they were reaching their limit. Have you ever given something up too easily and watched the other party immediately push for more, while a concession made reluctantly seemed to satisfy them? Consider times when you made a concession without asking for anything in return, and how that established a pattern that continued throughout the interaction. Think about the difference between a concession that felt like a genuine sacrifice versus one that seemed like no big deal. Remember feeling like you had won something when someone gave ground grudgingly versus feeling suspicious when they agreed too readily. Every exchange of concessions in your life has followed the patterns we discussed. Those negotiations where you felt you got a fair deal, those where you felt taken advantage of. These outcomes were shaped by the psychology of how concessions were made and received. When you make a concession, ask for something in return. This maintains the reciprocal nature of the exchange and prevents the other party from expecting unilateral concessions. Even if what you ask for is small, the act of requesting reciprocation establishes that you expect give and take. I can do that, but I would need you to help me with this frames your concession as part of an exchange rather than a surrender. Understanding cognitive biases. Cognitive biases are systematic patterns of deviation from rationality in judgment. They are mental shortcuts that helped our ancestors survive, but that can lead to errors in modern decision-making. Understanding these biases allows you to recognize when they are influencing your own thinking and to present information in ways that account for how others' minds naturally work. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek out, interpret, and remember information that confirms our existing beliefs while ignoring or dismissing information that contradicts them. This bias makes it difficult to change people's minds through direct argument because they will simply discount evidence that challenges their views. A more effective approach is to start from common ground and gradually introduce new perspectives that do not trigger defensive reactions. The availability heuristic leads us to judge the likelihood of events based on how easily examples come to mind. Dramatic events like plane crashes are overestimated in frequency because they are memorable, while common causes of death like heart disease are underestimated because they are less vivid. You can leverage this bias by making the outcomes you want people to consider more vivid and memorable through stories, examples, and concrete imagery. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing in something because of what has already been invested, even when cutting losses would be the rational choice. People stay in bad relationships, continue failing projects, and throw good money after bad because they cannot bear to waste their previous investments. Understanding this bias can help you recognize when you are falling prey to it and can help you frame decisions for others in ways that minimize the influence of sunk costs. Think about a belief you held strongly and how you interpreted all new information as supporting that belief while dismissing contradictory evidence. Remember, estimating risk based on dramatic stories you could easily recall rather than on actual statistics. Have you ever continued investing time, money, or effort in something simply because you had already invested so much, even though cutting losses would have been wiser? Consider times when you overestimated your own abilities or underestimated how long something would take. Think about jumping to conclusions based on limited information that happened to be vivid or recent. Remember a time when you attributed your success to skill, but your failures to bad luck. Every poor decision you have made, every judgment that turned out to be wrong, many of these can be traced to cognitive biases operating beneath your awareness. These mental shortcuts served our ancestors well, but lead us astray in the modern world. Recognizing them is the first step toward better thinking. Creating a sense of belonging. The need to belong is one of the most fundamental human motivations. We are tribal creatures who evolved in small groups where belonging was essential for survival. Today, this need manifests as a powerful desire to be accepted, included, and valued by the groups we identify with. Understanding this need allows you to create environments where people feel they belong, which increases their engagement, loyalty, and responsiveness to influence. People who feel they belong are more cooperative, more motivated, and more committed to group goals. They are also more influenced by group norms and by the people they perceive as fellow group members. Creating a sense of belonging is therefore one of the most powerful things you can do to increase your influence within any group or relationship. Think about a group where you truly felt you belonged, where you were accepted for who you were and felt part of something larger than yourself. Remember the contrast with groups where you felt like an outsider, where you were tolerated but never fully included. Have you noticed how much more you give to groups where you feel you belong, how you adopt their norms, defend their reputation, and sacrifice for their benefit? Consider how belonging to certain groups became part of your identity, shaping not just your behavior, but your sense of who you are. Think about rituals, inside jokes, and shared experiences that marked you as a member. Remember how it felt to be welcomed into a new group versus left on the periphery. Every group you have ever felt loyal to created that loyalty through belonging. Those teams you worked hardest for, those communities you contributed to, those organizations you defended, they earned your commitment by making you feel you were truly one of them. You can create belonging by emphasizing shared identity, values, and experiences. Use inclusive language that reinforces group membership. Acknowledge and celebrate what makes the group distinctive. Create rituals and traditions that mark group membership. Welcome new members warmly and help them understand group norms. All of these actions strengthen the sense of belonging that binds people to the group. Be aware that the need to belong can also be used manipulatively. Cults and high control groups exploit this need to create unhealthy dependence and to pressure members into harmful behaviors. Ethical influence respects people's autonomy and creates belonging that enhances their lives rather than trapping them. The goal should be genuine community and connection, not exploitation of a fundamental human need. The dynamics of group decision-making. Many important decisions are made by groups rather than individuals, and group dynamics add complexity to the influence process. Groups can make better decisions than individuals by pooling diverse knowledge and perspectives, but they can also make worse decisions due to phenomena like groupthink and social loafing. Understanding group dynamics allows you to influence group decisions more effectively and to help groups avoid common pitfalls. Groupthink occurs when the desire for harmony and conformity overrides realistic appraisal of alternatives. Group members suppress dissenting opinions, fail to critically analyze assumptions, and reach premature consensus. The result is often poor decisions that no individual member would have made on their own. To prevent groupthink, encourage dissent, assign someone to play devil's advocate, and create structures that ensure diverse viewpoints are heard. The order in which people speak in a group matters. Opinions expressed early tend to anchor the discussion and carry disproportionate weight. High-status group members also have outsized influence, regardless of the quality of their ideas. If you want your ideas to have maximum impact in a group setting, speak early and speak confidently. If you want to hear diverse perspectives, have people write down their views before discussion begins and call on lower-status members first. Coalition building is a key skill for influencing group decisions. Before a meeting, identify who is likely to support your position and who is likely to oppose it. Work to solidify support from allies and to understand and address the concerns of potential opponents. Building a coalition before the formal decision point often determines the outcome. The meeting itself becomes a formality that ratifies decisions that have already been effectively made through prior relationship building and persuasion. Remember a meeting where everyone agreed too quickly, where dissent was suppressed and obvious problems were ignored, only for the decision to fail spectacularly. Think about how the first person to speak often set the direction for the entire discussion. Have you noticed how high-status members of a group can dominate decisions even when their ideas are not the best? Consider a time when you had concerns but stayed silent because no one else was raising them, and you wondered later if others had stayed silent for the same reason. Think about decisions made by groups that were worse than what any individual member would have decided alone. Remember a coalition that formed before a meeting and effectively made the decision before the official discussion even started. Every group decision you have been part of has been shaped by these dynamics. Those bad decisions your team made, those meetings where real issues were never discussed, those outcomes that were predetermined by pre-meeting politics, all of these reflected the principles of group decision-making. Influence through environment design. The physical and social environment in which interactions take place significantly influences behavior and decisions. By thoughtfully designing environments, you can nudge people toward desired behaviors without explicit persuasion. This approach, sometimes called choice architecture, recognizes that the context in which choices are presented affects which choices people make. Default options are one of the most powerful environmental influences. People tend to stick with whatever option is presented as the default, even when other options might better serve their interests. This is why automatic enrollment in retirement savings plans dramatically increases participation rates. If you want people to make a particular choice, making it the default significantly increases the likelihood that they will choose it. The physical arrangement of space also influences behavior. Round tables promote equality and collaboration, while rectangular tables create hierarchies. Smaller spaces promote intimacy, while larger spaces can feel more formal and distant. The presence of mirrors increases self-awareness and can reduce antisocial behavior. By thinking carefully about the physical environment, you can create conditions that support the interactions you want to have. Social environments are equally important. The norms and behaviors of others in an environment influence how people behave. If everyone around you is working hard, you are more likely to work hard. If everyone is being friendly and open, you are more likely to be friendly and open. By carefully curating the social environment, whether through hiring decisions, team composition, or the culture you model, you shape the behaviors that become normal and expected. Think about how the arrangement of furniture in a room affected your conversations, how circular seating felt more collaborative while facing rows felt more formal. Remember default options that you never changed, whether retirement contribution rates, phone settings, or subscription preferences. Have you noticed how your behavior changes depending on your environment, how you are more productive in certain spaces, more social in others, more creative in others still? Consider how stores are designed to make you walk past more products, how websites are designed to keep you scrolling, how casinos are designed to keep you gambling. Think about the path of least resistance and how many of your daily choices simply follow that path. Remember choosing the option that was easiest to choose, rather than the option that was best for you. Every environment you enter is designed, and those designs influence your behavior. The defaults you accepted, the paths you followed, the choices that felt natural, many of these were shaped by someone who understood how environment influences action. The psychology of motivation. Understanding what motivates people is essential for influence. While external rewards and punishments can motivate behavior in the short term, intrinsic motivation, the internal drive to do something for its own sake, is far more powerful and sustainable. People who are intrinsically motivated work harder, persist longer, and produce higher quality work than those who are motivated by external incentives alone. Research by psychologist Edward Deci has identified 3 key factors that support intrinsic motivation: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is the feeling of control over one's own actions. Competence is the feeling of being effective and capable. Relatedness is the feeling of connection with others. When these 3 needs are satisfied, intrinsic motivation flourishes. When they are thwarted, motivation suffers. Think about work you have done purely for the joy of it versus work you did only because you were paid, and which one brought out your best effort. Remember a time when a reward you received for something you enjoyed actually reduced your enjoyment. Have you noticed how having control over your work, feeling competent, and being connected to others affects your motivation more than bonuses or penalties? Consider those activities you lose yourself in, where time disappears and effort feels effortless, and what conditions create that experience. Think about managers who tried to motivate you with external rewards versus those who created conditions where you wanted to do great work. Remember the difference between working toward your own goals versus working toward goals imposed on you. Every motivational strategy that has ever been used on you has either aligned with or violated the principles we discussed. Those jobs that energized you, those tasks that drained you, those rewards that backfired. All of these experiences reflect the psychology of motivation at work. To motivate others effectively, create conditions that satisfy these 3 needs. Give people meaningful choices and control over how they do their work. Provide opportunities for skill development and recognize competence when you see it. Build relationships and create a sense of community and shared purpose. These conditions support internal motivation that is far more powerful than any external incentive you could offer. Be aware that external rewards can sometimes undermine intrinsic motivation. If someone is already intrinsically motivated to do something, adding external rewards can shift their perception of why they are doing it. They may come to see themselves as doing it for the reward rather than for its own sake, and their intrinsic motivation may decrease. Use external rewards carefully and focus primarily on creating conditions that support internal motivation. Managing emotions in influence. Emotions play a central role in decision-making and behavior. Despite our self-image as rational beings, most of our decisions are driven by emotions and only later rationalized with logic. Understanding the role of emotions in influence allows you to communicate in ways that engage both heart and mind, which is far more effective than appealing to logic alone. Different emotions lead to different behaviors. Fear motivates avoidance and caution. Anger motivates confrontation and action. Sadness motivates withdrawal and reflection. Joy motivates approach and engagement. By understanding which emotions drive which behaviors, you can calibrate your emotional appeals to motivate the specific actions you want people to take. Emotional intelligence involves the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use emotions effectively. People with high emotional intelligence are better at reading others' emotional states, at managing their own emotions, and at using emotions strategically in social situations. Developing your emotional intelligence enhances your ability to influence because it gives you greater access to this crucial channel of human experience. Remember a decision you made while emotional that you later regretted when you had calmed down. Think about how different emotional states led you to completely different conclusions about the same situation. Have you noticed how your judgment changes when you are happy versus anxious versus angry? Consider how advertisers, politicians, and others deliberately evoke emotions to influence your choices. Think about a time when someone stayed calm while you were upset and how their emotional control gave them an advantage. Remember being persuaded not by logic, but by how something made you feel. Every major decision you have made has been influenced by your emotional state at the time. Those choices that seemed right in the moment but wrong in retrospect, those times you were manipulated through fear or excitement, those conflicts that escalated because emotions went unmanaged, all of these experiences demonstrate the central role of emotions in decision-making and the importance of emotional awareness and regulation. Managing your own emotions is particularly important for influence. If you become reactive and emotional, you lose the ability to think strategically, and you may damage relationships. Learning to stay calm under pressure, to respond rather than react, and to manage your emotional state deliberately are essential skills. This does not mean suppressing emotions, but rather being intentional about how and when you express them. The principle of perceived effort. People value things more when they perceive that effort has gone into creating them. This principle of perceived effort means that the same outcome can be valued very differently depending on how much work people believe went into achieving it. Understanding this principle allows you to present your work in ways that appropriately communicate the effort involved. Research has shown that people are willing to pay more for handmade goods than for machine-made goods of equivalent quality because they perceive greater effort in the handmade items. Similarly, advice that appears to be carefully considered is valued more than advice that seems offhand, even if the content is identical. The perception of effort influences value judgments in ways that are often independent of actual quality. Think about a time when you valued something more because you knew how much work went into it, even though the end result was no different from something produced easily. Remember handmade gifts that meant more than expensive purchased items because of the effort they represented. Have you noticed how quickly completed work is sometimes undervalued because it seemed too easy? Consider a professional whose expertise allowed them to solve your problem in minutes and how you questioned whether you should pay full price for such quick work. Think about meals that tasted better because you watched them being prepared with care. Remember doing something that appeared effortless to others and feeling that your work was not fully appreciated because they did not see the effort behind it. Every time perceived effort has influenced your valuation, every time you have valued process as much as outcome, you experienced this principle. The invisible work behind visible results often goes unrecognized, which is why making effort visible can increase appreciation. This principle has implications for how you present your work. If you make something difficult look too easy, others may undervalue it. Sometimes it is worth letting people see the effort behind your results. Showing your process, sharing the challenges you overcame, and demonstrating the thought that went into your work can increase how much it is valued and appreciated. However, there is a balance to strike. Excessive emphasis on effort can seem like complaining or excuse-making. The goal is not to appear to be struggling, but to ensure that the genuine effort you have invested is recognized. This is particularly important for work that is inherently invisible, like prevention efforts or behind-the-scenes support. Making this work visible ensures it receives appropriate recognition and resources. The role of identity in persuasion. People's sense of identity, who they believe themselves to be, is one of the most powerful forces shaping their behavior. We act in ways that are consistent with our self-concept and resist actions that conflict with it. Understanding the role of identity in persuasion allows you to frame your requests in ways that align with, rather than challenge, people's sense of who they are. Instead of asking people to take specific actions, you can appeal to their identity. Rather than asking someone to donate to charity, ask them if they are the kind of person who helps others in need. Rather than asking someone to work harder, ask them if they see themselves as someone who gives their best effort. When behavior is framed as an expression of identity rather than a compliance with a request, people are more motivated to follow through. Think about a time when you did something because it was consistent with who you believe yourself to be, even when it would have been easier not to. Remember how you responded when someone challenged not just your opinion but your identity, and how much more defensive you became. Have you noticed how you are more easily persuaded by appeals that align with your self-concept than by those that challenge it? Consider how joining a group changed your behavior as you adopted the identity of a member. Think about voting, purchasing, or lifestyle choices that reflected who you want to be rather than cold calculation of costs and benefits. Remember changing your behavior because someone said that is what people like you do. Every appeal to your identity has been more powerful than any appeal to pure logic. Those choices that felt deeply right, those causes you championed, those behaviors you maintained against practical considerations, many of these flowed from your sense of who you are. Identity is the hidden foundation of most of your decisions. Identity-based persuasion also works by creating new identities. If you can get someone to see themselves as a particular kind of person, they will tend to act consistently with that identity. This is why initiation rituals, team-building exercises, and organizational cultures are so powerful. They create shared identities that then shape behavior. "You are one of us" means I should act like one of you. Be aware that challenges to identity are often met with strong resistance. If your message implies that someone's self-concept is wrong or inadequate, they will likely become defensive and reject your influence. The most effective approach is to affirm people's positive identity while showing how your proposal is consistent with who they already are or want to be. The psychology of risk and uncertainty. How people perceive and respond to risk significantly influences their decisions. In general, people are risk-averse when it comes to gains, preferring a sure thing over a gamble with higher expected value. However, they become risk-seeking when it comes to losses, preferring to gamble for a chance to avoid loss rather than accept a certain smaller loss. Understanding these patterns allows you to frame choices in ways that account for people's natural risk preferences. The certainty effect describes our tendency to overweight outcomes that are certain relative to outcomes that are merely probable. A guaranteed small gain is often preferred over a larger gain that is only likely. This explains why people buy insurance, which typically has negative expected value, and why salespeople emphasize guarantees. If you can offer certainty, that certainty has psychological value beyond its objective worth. Remember choosing a guaranteed smaller reward over a gamble for a larger one, even when the math favored the gamble. Think about insurance policies you purchased that had negative expected value, but which you bought anyway for peace of mind. Have you noticed how the same odds seem different when framed as chances of winning versus chances of losing? Consider gambles you took to avoid a certain loss that you never would have taken for an equivalent gain. Think about how uncertainty itself caused you distress, leading you to choose worse options just to eliminate doubt. Remember preferring to know bad news rather than remain in suspense, even when knowing changed nothing. Every risk decision you have ever made has been shaped by these psychological patterns. Those insurance policies, those gambles refused and taken, those preferences for certainty over uncertainty. All of these reflected not rational calculation, but the quirks of how human minds perceive and respond to risk. People also evaluate risks differently depending on how they are presented. A medical procedure described as having a 90% survival rate seems safer than one described as having a 10% mortality rate, even though the statistics are identical. This framing effect means that how you present risk information can significantly influence how people respond to it. Choose your frames thoughtfully to communicate risk in ways that support good decision-making. Uncertainty itself is psychologically aversive. People will sometimes make objectively worse choices just to reduce uncertainty. This explains why people often prefer to know bad news rather than remain in suspense, and why clear but flawed plans are often preferred over ambiguous but potentially better alternatives. If you can reduce uncertainty for others, you provide psychological relief that they will value. Influence in digital communication. Much of our communication now takes place through digital channels, including email, text messages, social media, and video calls. These channels present unique challenges and opportunities for influence. Understanding how digital communication differs from face-to-face interaction allows you to adapt your influence strategies for the digital age. Digital communication strips away many of the nonverbal cues we rely on in face-to-face interaction. Without tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language, messages can be easily misunderstood. What was intended as friendly sarcasm might be read as hostility. What was meant as a simple request might be perceived as a demand. Being aware of this limitation, effective digital communicators are more explicit about their intentions and more careful in their word choices. Remember an email or text that was completely misunderstood because the tone was lost in translation. Think about how much harder it is to build rapport through a screen than in person. Have you noticed how quickly digital conversations can escalate into conflict when the same conversation in person would have remained civil? Consider important messages you labored over, choosing every word carefully because you could not rely on tone and expression to convey your meaning. Think about video calls that felt almost but not quite like real conversations, missing subtle cues that would have been present in person. Remember relationships that exist primarily through text and how different they feel from relationships with physical presence. Every frustrating digital miscommunication, every relationship that was harder to maintain remotely, every message that came across wrong, these experiences reveal the limitations of digital communication and the importance of compensating for what is lost when we communicate through screens. The asynchronous nature of much digital communication is both a challenge and an opportunity. On one hand, the delay between messages can reduce the sense of connection and make it harder to build rapport. On the other hand, it gives you time to craft your messages carefully rather than responding in the moment. Use this time wisely. Think about how your message will be perceived, consider alternative phrasings, and review before sending. Video communication restores some of the nonverbal richness lost in text-based channels. When influence is important, video is generally preferable to phone, which is generally preferable to email. However, even in video calls, subtle cues are harder to detect, and technical issues can create disconnection. Wherever possible, save your most important influence attempts for face-to-face interactions, where you have access to the full range of human communication. The ethical dimension of influence. All the techniques we have discussed can be used ethically or unethically. The difference lies in intent, transparency, and outcome. Ethical influence seeks to create value for all parties and respects people's autonomy to make their own decisions. Unethical influence manipulates people for the influencer's benefit at the expense of those being influenced. As you develop your influence skills, it is essential to reflect on the ethical dimension of how you use them. One useful framework for ethical influence is to ask whether you would be comfortable if your influence attempts were made fully transparent. If the other person knew exactly what you were doing and why, would they still find it acceptable? If you are using techniques that only work when they are hidden, that is a warning sign. Ethical influence does not require hiding your methods because your methods are not exploitative. Think about a time when you were manipulated by someone using these techniques for their benefit at your expense, and how betrayed you felt when you realized it. Remember the difference between being persuaded by someone who genuinely had your interests at heart versus someone who only pretended to. Have you used influence techniques in ways that helped others get what they truly wanted versus in ways you are not proud of? Consider salespeople, politicians, and others who used psychological principles transparently and ethically versus those who exploited them manipulatively. Think about relationships built on genuine connection and mutual benefit versus those built on one-sided manipulation. Remember times when you wished you had been more skeptical of persuasion attempts and times when healthy skepticism protected you. Every influence attempt you have experienced or made sits somewhere on a spectrum from ethical to manipulative. The techniques themselves are neutral. It is the intent, transparency, and outcome that determine whether influence serves everyone's interests or only the influencers. Another test is to consider the outcomes. Does your influence help the other person get what they truly want? Or does it lead them to choices they would regret if they had full information? Ethical influence helps people make better decisions, decisions that serve their genuine interests. It provides information, frames choices helpfully, and supports good decision-making processes. It does not exploit vulnerabilities or create false beliefs. The most sustainable influence comes from genuine alignment of interests. When you help others achieve their goals while also achieving your own, you build relationships and reputation that serve you well over time. Short-term manipulation may produce quick wins, but creates enemies and destroys trust. Long-term ethical influence may require more patience, but produces far better results over a lifetime of relationships and interactions. The power of anticipation and expectation. What people expect to experience significantly shapes what they actually experience. This power of expectation, sometimes called the placebo effect in medical contexts, operates across all domains of human experience. If someone expects a wine to taste good because it has an expensive label, they will often rate it as tasting better than the identical wine with a cheap label. If someone expects a treatment to work, it is more likely to work. Understanding this principle allows you to shape expectations in ways that improve outcomes. Setting positive expectations before an experience can enhance that experience significantly. If you tell someone that a meal is going to be delicious, they are more likely to enjoy it. If you tell someone that a meeting is going to be productive, they are more likely to engage productively. This is not about creating false expectations that will inevitably be disappointed, but about orienting attention toward positive aspects that might otherwise be overlooked. Remember a vacation that was more enjoyable in anticipation than in reality, when the looking forward was actually the best part. Think about how your expectations shaped your experience, how a meal tasted better when you expected it to be delicious, how a movie disappointed because the trailer had set your expectations too high. Have you noticed how being told something would be painful made it hurt more, while being told it would be easy made it feel easier? Consider the placebo effect, times when the belief that something would help actually made it help. Think about self-fulfilling prophecies, expectations that created the very outcomes they predicted. Remember how someone's positive expectations of you brought out your best, while negative expectations seemed to limit you. Every experience you have ever had was colored by what you expected beforehand. Those experiences that exceeded expectations and those that fell short, those beliefs that became reality, all of these demonstrate the remarkable power of anticipation and expectation to shape what we perceive and experience. The anticipation of an experience is often as important as the experience itself. Research has shown that people derive significant pleasure from looking forward to positive events, sometimes more than from the events themselves. This is why vacations are often more enjoyable in anticipation than in reality, and why the days before a holiday can be filled with joy. You can leverage this by helping people anticipate positive outcomes and by creating moments worth anticipating. Conversely, negative expectations can become self-fulfilling prophecies. If someone expects a situation to go badly, their behavior may make that outcome more likely. They may be defensive, withdrawn, or hostile, eliciting negative responses from others that confirm their expectations. Breaking this cycle requires creating new expectations through positive experiences that contradict existing negative beliefs. This is often a gradual process that requires patience and consistency. Strategic use of questions in negotiation. Questions are powerful tools in negotiation because they gather information while also shaping the direction of the conversation. Skilled negotiators use questions strategically to understand the other party's interests, to test assumptions, and to guide the discussion toward productive outcomes. The right question at the right time can unlock a negotiation that has reached an impasse. Open-ended questions that begin with what, how, or why encourage the other party to share more information. What is most important to you in this deal? How did you arrive at that number? Why is that particular term essential? These questions invite elaboration and reveal underlying interests that might not be apparent from stated positions. The information you gather through thoughtful questioning gives you material to work with in crafting creative solutions. Think about a negotiation where asking the right question completely changed the dynamic, revealing information that shifted everything. Remember feeling that someone truly understood your position because they asked thoughtful questions rather than just stating their demands. Have you noticed how a question can challenge someone's position without creating the defensiveness that a statement would? Consider negotiations where you talked too much and listened too little, missing crucial information that would have helped you. Think about times when asking, "How am I supposed to do that?" worked better than simply refusing. Remember discovering underlying interests that were different from stated positions, only because someone asked the right questions. Every successful negotiation you have been part of likely involved strategic questioning that uncovered information, demonstrated understanding, and guided the conversation toward resolution. Those breakthroughs, those creative solutions, they emerged from questions, not from arguments. Calibrated questions are designed to make the other party think and engage with your perspective without triggering defensiveness. Instead of saying, "Your price is too high," ask, "How am I supposed to do that at this price?" Instead of refusing a demand, ask, "What makes this so important to you?" These questions shift the burden of problem solving to the other party and often reveal flexibility that would not have been apparent otherwise. Questions can also be used to create commitment and accountability. If I agree to this, what will you do to ensure delivery on time? How will we know if this agreement is working? What happens if circumstances change? These questions establish expectations and create psychological commitment to follow through. They also surface potential problems before they occur, allowing them to be addressed proactively rather than becoming sources of conflict later. The influence of physical states on mental states. The mind and body are deeply interconnected, and physical states significantly influence mental states. When you are tired, hungry, or uncomfortable, you think differently than when you are rested, fed, and comfortable. Understanding this connection allows you to manage your own physical state for optimal mental performance and to recognize how physical factors might be influencing others. Research has shown that judges give harsher sentences before lunch when they are hungry and more lenient sentences after lunch when they are satisfied. This judicial finding illustrates how profoundly physical states can influence even highly trained professionals making important decisions. When you need to make important decisions or engage in challenging negotiations, attend to your physical state first. Eat, rest, and ensure you are physically comfortable. Remember a decision you made when hungry that you would have made differently after eating. Think about how your mood and judgment change when you are tired versus well-rested. Have you noticed how standing tall and open affects how you feel compared to slouching with arms crossed? Consider important conversations or decisions that went poorly because you were physically uncomfortable, too hot, too cold, in pain, or otherwise physically stressed. Think about the difference in your thinking between a sunny day and a grey one, or between a cramped environment and an open one. Remember times when physical exercise cleared your mind and changed your perspective on a problem. Every mental state exists within a physical body, and those physical conditions influence thoughts, feelings, and decisions in ways you often do not notice. Those bad decisions made while depleted, those negative moods traced to physical causes, those perspective shifts triggered by changing your body, all of these reveal the profound connection between physical and mental states. Body posture also influences mental state. Adopting expansive, confident postures can actually increase feelings of confidence and willingness to take risks. Conversely, contracted, defensive postures can increase feelings of powerlessness and anxiety. Before important interactions, take a moment to adjust your posture, standing tall with shoulders back and head up. This physical adjustment can shift your psychological state in ways that improve your performance. Temperature, lighting, and other environmental factors also influence mood and decision-making. Warm environments tend to promote more positive social judgments, while cold environments can create emotional distance. Bright lighting increases arousal and analytical thinking, while dim lighting promotes relaxation and creativity. Consider these factors when choosing settings for important interactions, and be aware of how they might be influencing you and others. The art of making people feel important. One of the deepest human desires is to feel important and valued. People will go to extraordinary lengths to satisfy this need, and those who make others feel important gain tremendous influence. This is not about flattery or manipulation, but about genuinely recognizing and appreciating the value that others bring. When you make people feel important, they become more open, more cooperative, and more positively disposed toward you. Making someone feel important involves paying attention to them, listening to them, and taking their thoughts and feelings seriously. It means remembering details about their lives and following up on things they have shared with you. It means asking for their opinions and genuinely considering their input. These behaviors communicate that you value them as individuals, not just as means to your ends. Public recognition is a particularly powerful way to make people feel important. Praising someone's contributions in front of others amplifies the positive effect because it satisfies the desire for both importance and social validation. However, public recognition must be genuine and specific to be effective. Generic or unearned praise can feel hollow or even embarrassing. Take the time to identify specific contributions worth recognizing and acknowledge them authentically. Every person you meet, regardless of their status or position, wants to feel valued and respected. The CEO and the janitor share this fundamental need. Those who treat everyone with equal respect, regardless of what that person can do for them, build reputations for integrity and earn loyalty that transcends transactional relationships. Make everyone you encounter feel that they matter, because they do, and watch how this transforms your relationships and influence. Remember how it felt when someone made you feel truly seen and valued, not for what you could do for them, but for who you are. Think about people who made you feel important through their attention, their interest, their recognition of your contributions. Have you noticed the difference between those who engage with everyone respectfully and those whose kindness varies based on what they can gain? Consider that leader, teacher, or friend who made everyone they encountered feel valuable, and how that quality drew people to them. Think about times when you felt invisible or dismissed, and how strongly you reacted against those who made you feel that way. Remember the loyalty you felt toward those who recognized your worth when others overlooked you. Every relationship that has inspired your loyalty was built on someone making you feel important. Those people you go out of your way to help, those leaders you follow willingly, those friends you trust completely, they earned that position by consistently making you feel valued and seen. Understanding and navigating status dynamics. Every social interaction involves implicit status dynamics. Who is higher status and who is lower status influences how people behave, what they say, and how messages are received. Understanding status dynamics allows you to navigate them skillfully, adjusting your approach based on your relative position and the norms of the context. Status can be based on many factors: formal position, expertise, experience, social connections, wealth, or personal qualities like confidence and charisma. Different contexts weight these factors differently. In a corporate meeting, formal position carries heavy weight. In a community of experts, demonstrated expertise matters more. Understanding what confers status in a particular context helps you position yourself effectively. Think about conversations where you felt lower status than the other person, and how that affected what you said and how you said it. Remember meetings where the highest-ranking person spoke and everyone else fell in line, regardless of the quality of their idea. Have you noticed how differently you behave around people you perceive as higher status versus lower status versus equals? Consider times when you deferred to someone because of their position, even though you knew more about the topic at hand. Think about how you treated someone based on your assumptions about their status, and whether those assumptions were accurate. Remember situations where you felt confident and high status, and how that changed your effectiveness. Every interaction you have exists within a status context that shapes what is said, what is heard, and what is possible. Those conversations where you could not speak freely, those relationships where status differences created barriers, all of these experiences reflect the often invisible status dynamics operating in every social situation. When interacting with higher status individuals, show respect for their position while maintaining your own dignity. Excessive deference can come across as weakness or insincerity, but insufficient deference can seem arrogant or disrespectful. Find the balance that acknowledges their status while demonstrating your own competence and value. Higher status individuals often appreciate those who can engage with them as equals on matters of substance. When interacting with lower status individuals, be conscious of the power dynamics at play. They may feel pressure to agree with you, to laugh at your jokes, and to suppress their own opinions. Create space for genuine interaction by actively inviting their input and taking it seriously. The way you treat those who have less power than you reveals your character and often influences how others perceive you. The science of habit formation. Much of human behavior is habitual, operating automatically without conscious thought. Understanding how habits form and how they can be changed provides powerful tools for influencing behavior, both your own and others. The key insight is that habits are driven by cues, routines, and rewards, and intervening at any point in this loop can change behavior. Habits form through repetition. Each time a behavior is performed in response to a cue and followed by a reward, the habit loop strengthens. Eventually, the behavior becomes automatic, triggered by the cue without conscious decision. This is why new behaviors are hard at first, but become easy over time, and why old habits are hard to break, even when we consciously want to change. Think about behaviors you perform automatically without thinking, from morning routines to how you respond to certain triggers. Remember a habit you tried to break through willpower alone and how difficult or impossible that was. Have you noticed how certain environments or situations automatically trigger certain behaviors, for better or worse? Consider habits you formed without intending to, simply through repetition, and how those habits now run your life. Think about the difference between who you are on autopilot and who you are when you make conscious choices. Remember that habit you successfully changed by replacing the routine rather than just trying to stop it. Every automatic behavior in your life was created through the habit loop of cue, routine, and reward. Those behaviors you do without thinking, those patterns you cannot seem to break, those automatic responses that happen before you can intervene. All of these are habits that were formed according to the principles we discussed, and all of them can be understood and intentionally changed using those same principles. To create new habits, start small and be consistent. The power of habits comes from their automaticity, which only develops through repetition. A small behavior performed consistently is more likely to become a habit than a large behavior performed sporadically. Attach the new behavior to an existing cue and ensure there is a reward that reinforces the behavior. Over time, the behavior will become automatic. To change existing habits, identify the cue that triggers the behavior and the reward that reinforces it. Then substitute a new routine that provides a similar reward in response to the same cue. Trying to eliminate a habit through willpower alone usually fails because the underlying cue and reward remain. By keeping the cue and reward while changing the routine, habit change becomes much more achievable.